Earth, fire, air, water. Elements all different and unique from one another, yet there was always a need for balance between them all. Earth complemented water as much as air supplemented fire. Without their halves, the elements and the world at large would be thrown into chaos, out of balance. Only the Avatar can master all four elements and maintain the balance of the world. For hundreds of years, the Avatars were mediators between all the nations, the bridge between the physical and the spiritual worlds. 12 years before the Great Airbender genocide, Avatar Roku met his demise on his home island. Moments later, he was reborn to Avatar Aang of the Air Nomads. Aang became a powerful airbender, mastering the elements at the age of 12. After the Air Nomads revealed Aang's Avatar status, they attempted to separate him from his master. Overwhelmed, Aang ran away from his home. The young Avatar was caught in a storm, encased in ice. After a century, he was discovered by Katara and Sokka of the Southern Water Tribe. They helped to re-assimilate Aang into the new world. The Fire Nation was achieving world domination. With the help of his friends, Aang defeated the Fire Nation and the Phoenix King, restoring balance to the world. He would go on to spend the rest of his life maintaining the balance of the nations, the world, and the spirits. Kingdom Hearts, the source of all hearts, power, and wisdom. The guardian of this kingdom was the Keyblade. In the past, Keyblade wielders, who fashioned weapons in the image of the original Keyblade, began a battle over the ownership of light. The war created darkness in the world, and the Keyblade was shattered. Many years after the Great War, Keyblade wielders started to master the fragments of the original Keyblade. Some used their power for darkness, and others for light. On a peaceful land named Destiny Island, there was a boy named Sora who sought adventure above all else. With his friends Riku and Kairi, they agreed to travel beyond the horizon of their island's ocean. But before they could depart, their island was consumed by darkness. Though Riku was originally destined for a Keyblade, Sora was chosen as his rightful owner because of his denial of the darkness. Sora's following adventures led him through many worlds across the realm of light. With the help of the mage Donald and the guardian Goofy, Sora fought through many enemies, most notably the Heartless. Sora brought peace back to the realm of light, but it was only temporary. Darkness remained, and Sora would stand against those who would do harm to his friends. In this matchup, I will be observing the 14-year-old Aang throughout the Avatar comic book series, which takes place a couple years after the main TV series. This time, I'll be analyzing Aang with his airbending staff. For Sora, I'll be observing him at the age of 14 as well, during the events of Kingdom Hearts and Chain of Memories, though most of my analysis will come from Kingdom Hearts, as Sora sort of lost his memories from Chain of Memories. For those who are not familiar with the character or the plot, it's a long story, and that's not even a quarter of it. Considering that Sora is a video game character, I will be making adjustments to some of his abilities. I will go into more detail as I come to each ability, but for now, I will be disallowing Sora's ability to summon, cure, and stop time. But everything else is fair game. At the age of 14, Aang's most notable physical attribute was his speed and agility. More often than not, he was evading the attacks of his foes, whether by way of jumps and leaps, or body touch evasion. He was so light on his feet, even Toph could not pick him up with her seismic sense. And with Aang's glider, his already impressive acrobatics were enhanced. However, he left a bit to be desired when it came to his strength and constitution. Aang does not get hit very often, but when he does, he usually is taken out of the fight, whether it be indefinite or momentary. Before adventuring with Donald and Goofy, Sora was a pretty typical teenage male, physically fit, but unremarkable. Even in his first fight with Leon, whether the player wins or loses, Sora drops out due to exhaustion. It wasn't until he faced the Heartless throughout the Realm of Light that his physical attributes grew immensely, capable of superhuman achievements. He learned how to glide, increasing his mobility. He learned several combos with his Keyblade, enhancing his speed. By the end of the game, Sora was standing against some of the best, most notably the gladiators of Olympus Coliseum and Ansem, Seeker of Darkness. Generally speaking, it's hard to determine the durability of a video game character. The mechanic of a health bar makes it difficult to develop a proper analysis. Though at a base level, Sora is more impressive, Aang can augment all of his physical attributes with either his glider or his airbending. So when discussing their speed and agility, they are relatively on par. Sora could glide and jump with superhuman ability, but Aang could replicate similar dexterity, though his glider is a bit less agile. So that really leaves us with their fortitude and strength. Aang's constitution is definitely not his strongest attribute, and we only have a few examples of Sora's durability outside of gameplay mechanics. For instance, if we have Aang in a video game, his durability through gameplay will look very similar. With regards to a physical verdict, the most fair assessment would be to call it inconclusive. Neither Aang nor Sora hold any significant advantage with regards to speed, and a comparison of their durability is unreliable. For this, no edge will be given for their physical abilities. As an avatar, Aang could bend every element: earth, fire, air, and water. Likewise, Sora could use magic to produce similar elements, such as fire, blizzard, thunder, air, and gravity. For the beginning of this breakdown, I'll be examining how Aang's elemental bending stacks up against Sora's magic. First, let's look at fire. Though Aang was proficient with fire, trained by the last dragons, there is no indication that he mastered the element, even in the ongoing comic book series. When facing Phoenix King Ozai, he barely used the element, even under the power of Sozin's comet. However, he was quite effective with lightning redirection, which was an extension of firebending. Like Aang, Sora could also produce a fire spell. This spell was effective against groups of enemies or single opponents, and though the base level of its use was powerful, it wouldn't likely be effective against Aang. Instead, it would probably just give Aang more firepower, pun intended. Sora could also produce thunder, but again, Avatar Aang can negate this power, redirecting Sora's lightning. Though to be fair, Sora's lightning bolts were a fair bit larger and more random than in the Avatar universe. Next, we have Aang's waterbending in comparison to Sora's use of ice. Next to air, Aang was most proficient with water, and I would even say he mastered the elements by the end of his series, though this is never confirmed. Again, I think Sora would just be supplying Aang with more ammo if he used ice against him. Aang would be able to use the ice crystals to his advantage, and like a typical waterbender, he would redirect the attacks back to Sora. The same cannot be said about air, however. Aang and Sora's use of air were quite different, yet the principle was similar. They both used the element defensively, which was the basis for air nomads in Avatar and magicians in Kingdom Hearts. However, Aang could also apply air offensively, while Sora can only use it as a defensive barrier. In this way, Aang would not be able to use air against Sora in the same way he could with fire, lightning, or ice, but he still could apply pressure against the Keyblade warrior, especially with the use of his airbending staff. For our final comparison, we have Earth and gravity. In the Avatar universe, Earth was the element of substance, classified by its strength and straightforward nature. Its discipline was based around neutral Jing, the wisdom of knowing when to wait and when to strike. For Aang, Earth was the most difficult element to learn, as it was directly opposed to his style and personality. He was taught by the young prodigy Toph Beifong. Though she was blind, she could sense all movement around her through a seismic sense. While difficult, in time, Aang adapted these methods. Despite the fact that Toph said his earthbending needed work, it served Aang well against Phoenix King Ozai and General Old Iron. Now, Sora's use of gravity doesn't directly correlate to Aang's use of Earth, but the ability does act as a direct defense to it. While the spell Gravaga could be used offensively, it could also be used in defense. The spell created a small event horizon. Anything in its vicinity could be sucked in, including any boulders Aang might throw at Sora. As I stated earlier in the video, I'll be disallowing Sora's use of Cure, Summon, and Stop. The reason I disqualify Cure is because to me, this is chiefly a video game mechanic. I am not using Sora's ability to stop time for similar reasons. Again, to me, this only works in the context of the video game, where a character can be stopped in time because they have a health bar that must be depleted. I am not counting Sora's ability to summon because they are directly tied to summoning additional help from characters in his universe. For this matchup, I wanted to examine a direct one-on-one confrontation between the Keyblade wielder and the Last Airbender. With all that out of the way, let's look into Aang's use of the Avatar State. The Avatar State is effectively the element of balance. It is without dispute the strongest form of elemental bending, combining earth, fire, air, and water, all in one. During Aang's television series, he had trouble submitting into the Avatar State, but in the ongoing comics, he used it at will. Sora's most notable weapon was, of course, his Keyblade. It afforded him greater strength, speed, and hitting power. Throughout his adventures in the Realm of Light and Castle Oblivion, he learned many combinations and movesets with his Keyblade, such as Strike Raid, Sonic Blade, Ragnarok, and many, many more. Many of these special abilities augmented Sora's speed and mobility to superhuman levels, more than a match for the Avatar State. The toughest part about comparing Aang and Sora is judging what is canon and what is video game mechanics with regards to Sora. In terms of elemental bending, they both had their advantages and disadvantages, but more often than not, Aang could use Sora's magic against him. However, Sora did have his own advantage with gravity magic, and while Aang made good use of the Avatar State, Sora's own abilities with his Keyblade placed him as a contender, if not Aang's superior with regards to damage output and speed. The main comparison here may lie in the opponents each of them faced. The most powerful enemies Aang faced were Phoenix King Ozai and the infamous spirit, General Iron. Sora has faced enemies like Marluxia and Ansem. Specifically, Ansem transformed into several forms, some of which Sora fought on his own before the Seeker of Darkness was defeated. When it comes down to it, Sora's enemies were stronger, wielding powers greater than elemental bending, often using esoteric magic. Yet Sora stood his ground against them all, contending with their magic or their physical might, even without the aid of Donald or Goofy. Aang fought some formidable opponents, but they aren't exactly comparable. For this, I would give the comfortable edge to Sora for his combative abilities. As a strategist, Aang was quick and clever, only using violence as a necessary defense. At his core, he was a pacifist, like a typical airbender, especially one so dedicated to conventional teachings. Aang was a dedicated defensive fighter. Aang's mode of operation was to outlast his foe, rather than overwhelm them, biding his time until they slipped up or when he found an opening. Much like a waterbender, Aang's strength came from his counters. He fought more with his wits and precision than he did his brawn and power, looking for angles, looking for that path of least resistance. As a tactical fighter, Sora was a bit more straightforward. Sometimes he could be too headstrong or stubborn, jumping into situations without much forethought. When he went through the Keyblade Master Trials, he failed the test because he was overconfident. This overconfidence also led Sora sometimes being seen as gullible, unaware of the larger schemes at play. His talent came from his natural ability, his intuitive fighting style. And though he was impulsive, his tenacious fighting style forced his opponent to always be on their toes. It can be debated that Sora packed more punch than Aang. This is definitely the case at close range, though a little more murky at long range. But this wouldn't matter much because Aang outlasted his foes when he could. He would let Sora press an aggressive assault until he could pin him down, whether by way of an opening or a slip-up on Sora's part. Sora has faced some extraordinary enemies, but few were as evasive as Aang. However, Sora has faced enemies who could teleport without much issue. The question lies in Aang's ability to hit Sora enough to bring him down before Sora lands a decisive blow with his Keyblade or magic. It's close, but on the basis of pure tactics, I favor Aang. Avatar Aang gets a slight edge for his tactical abilities. The fight between Aang and Sora would be a very interesting contest of the physical and the elemental. They were both formidable fighters, though in different ways. Aang was noted for his mastery of the elements, while Sora was esteemed for his melee combat. They were both very similar in the way that they were carefree, compassionate, and forgiving. They both put their friends first and protected them with a fierce drive. Let's set up this fight. Let's say it takes place on Mount Katsuragi. As a final tally, I would say the advantage to the victor goes 6-10. The following is a hypothetical battle of one majority victory. The opponents would stand several feet away from each other, Aang with his staff, Sora with his Keyblade. Sora would likely attack first, charging at Aang while shooting out ice from his Keyblade. It wouldn't be difficult for Aang to get a hold of the water and the blizzard shards. Quickly, the Avatar would turn Sora's spell against him. Sora would use a dodge roll to evade the ice daggers, his intuition keeping him cool under pressure. Once the attack stopped, Sora would lift his Keyblade again, shooting fire in rapid succession. But again, Aang has a deeper sense of the element, turning the spell against the Keyblade wielder. This time, Sora would forfeit a dodge roll. Instead, he would cast Aeroga to protect himself from the flames. And once he saw an opening, he would summon Thundaga, raining lightning bolts on the Avatar. But once again, Aang redirects the magic, shooting it back at Sora. With his Keyblade raised, Sora defends himself from the redirected lightning bolt. At this point, it would be clear to Sora, the use of elemental magic would be no good against Aang. It would only give the Avatar more to work with. Sora would change strategy. He would likely try to close the distance on Aang, using his Keyblade to puncture through the Airbender's defense. After flinging the redirected lightning away, Sora would use his Keyblade in a sliding dash. But Aang, being the defensive fighter that he is, would slip the kick. For boxing fans, it would be very similar to Mayweather's Philly shell defense, in the sense that Aang would not meet the impact head-on, but slip the kick, dampening its impact. In any case, it would give Aang enough time to use his staff, keeping distance from Sora's Keyblade. But Sora would have different plans. As Aang flies away to a safe distance, Sora would use Graviga to pull him back. Aang would struggle against the Event Horizon's pull. His staff would break apart piece by piece. The Avatar would give it his all, but the pull would be too much, bringing him in closer and closer. But then, his eyes would glow. The tattoos on his head and arms would illuminate blue. Aang would submit to the Avatar state. With the extra boost, Aang would successfully fly away from the gravity well, encasing himself in an elemental ball. Sora would take flight as well, chasing after the Avatar. At this point, it would be a fight of the Titans, a war of attrition. Aang and Sora would zip in, out, and around the mountain in flight, waiting for their opponent to slip. Aang would play the same game of defense, using the elements to hinder Sora's movements, whether by way of a huge boulder or a jet of fire. Sora would play to his offense, using abilities such as Sonic Blade, Vortex, and Ragnarok to slip through Aang's defense. Unlike Ozai, Sora would put up a fight, and Aang would have to contend with a peer. Sora would be used to fighting someone of Aang's power level, such as the final form of Ansem. In the end, the match would be decided by damage output. Aang and Sora would trade blows. The Avatar would use everything he could to contend. The Keyblade wielder would use every ability he could to bypass Aang's elemental ball. But eventually, Sora would puncture Aang's defense. Aang would definitely get his licks in, making Sora work for his victory. But Aang would not have the abilities to contend with Keyblade combinations, nor the experience of fighting an opponent with such devastating power, agility, and strength. And thus, I declare Sora, the Keyblade wielder, the guardian of the light, the victor. Of course, this is all my opinion based on the source material. Please leave your thoughts and comments below. Do you think the Avatar could have taken a majority against Sora? Or do you agree that the majority would have gone to the Keyblade wielder? Let me know. And of course, peace, love, and be water, my friends. And remember, Kingdom Hearts is light.
The device is still offline, but the base of operations should be just over there.
I was interested to see how two of the top Dark Lords of the respective universes would work off each other, how the Force matches up against good old magic. The name's Shepard. Antoine Shepard. At his... I think my brother is peeing right now. I think I hear pee going into a toilet. No, I'm wrong. Yeah, he's not peeing. Wait. Yeah, no, he's not peeing. Alright, here we go. Let's continue. At his core, he was a pacifist.